Welcome back. I hope you survived exam two. And let's get going on the next one. Okay, let's see. Here we go. Oops. I don't know why that shows up like that. Okay. The 20th century, which is a very, very interesting period because there's so many different styles going on. You have the new treatment of harmony, a new treatment of tonality, new treatment of pretty much everything. And then the romantic period overlaps that. So the turn of the century, you have so many different things going on and so many different trends. So it's a very fascinating time. So some of the general characteristics or some of the general reasons why this happened is why the harmony changes and why things become less conventional is due to World War One. Okay. Um, in the Romantic period, death was kind of glamorized. The supernatural was glamorized. And then you have this horrible, horrible event that affects so many people in so many negative ways. And people realize, oh my gosh, life is not that beautiful. Love is not, to be idealized in this way. And death certainly should not be glamorized in any way. So it's this realism. Okay. So that is a huge reason why the music ends up being the way it is. Okay. It reflects that. Another thing is we have still have a long way to go, but we have a little more diversity. We have some people of color, not enough. We have more women involved. Okay. So we have a little more. It's not just, white guys. All right. Um, the harmony is much more challenging and breaking, okay, on the edge. More dissonance, all right. It's not as consonant and pleasant to hear. It's more discord and unpleasant. And this is a reflection of World War One. Absolutely, it is. Okay. Different tonal systems. Instead of having major and minor, they might use the modes from the medieval era and the Renaissance eras. So, a variety of tonal systems, which I'll get to more as we go along. Syncopation. It's They think it's boring just to be one, two, three, four. I mean, we do have some syncopation, of course, in the earlier eras, but even more so, okay, which influences jazz as well, which happens in the 20th century. Meter changes. You don't stay in 4/4, stay in 2/4 or 6/8 the entire time. You'll be in 4/4 for a few measures, change to 6/8, change to 2/4, 3/8, asymmetrical meters, okay, 7/8, more variety in rhythm. The tone color is much more imaginative or more imaginative. You don't just have the four families of instruments in an orchestra. You'll have more use of wind instruments, which is why the symphonic band becomes more prevalent in the 20th century. Prior to the 20th century, it was mostly the four families of instruments, which includes the strings. But you get to the 20th century, you'll have band, you'll just wind instruments, you'll just have a woodman, more use of, like I say, a woodwind quintet. Okay, there's more 20th century music and 21st century music written for that. Percussion ensemble. Okay, so more interesting combinations of instruments. Okay, the United States becomes very involved because of the persecution many people experienced in Europe due to the world wars, both eventually. Many of them emigrate here and pass along their amazing musical traditions to Americans. Okay, for a while, Europe was the leading place for music conservatories and the best music schools, but now the United States rivals, and many people from Europe come to the United States now. Okay, before people from the United States would go to Europe, and now it's the reverse. Okay, but there's still some excellent schools in Russia and Europe and so forth. But especially when you get into the Cold War, many Russians end up defecting and come to school here. That's why we have so many great Russian musicians here. Um, as I mentioned, more women, more people of color. And so those were the general trends of music in the 20th century. Okay. So post romantic and 20th century. Okay. So we're going to start with a style that is pleasant to listen to kind of ease you all in. Okay. Impressionism is reflects the French um, painters. Okay, you might have heard of Monet. Degas is the one who paints all the dancers. Manet and Renoir, beautiful paintings. Okay, but it's not just a portrait, or just a tree there. They'll have many different strokes, and it kind of, you're not sure what to look at. Okay, that's what impressionism is. It's very ambiguous, all right? And this is reflected in music as well. Also, you should know there can be three styles before 1950 that you should know. And impressionism is our first one. There'll be impressionism. Classicism is the second, and expressionism is the third. Okay, so we're starting with impressionism. All right. So the definition, I guess you could say, it's the suggestion of ideas and images. It's not telling you here's a face. That's it. The painter is telling you to look at that face. Impressionism is more like, yeah, you make up your mind what you want to listen to. So it's suggestions of ideas and images. Okay, it doesn't tell you exactly what to watch or what to look for. Okay, and that is reflected in the music. So when you listen to the music, you're like, oh, well, that's interesting, and but should we listen to this? So same thing. Also, impressionistic music tends to be programmatic. So there are usually descriptive titles associated with impressionism. Okay. Also, you don't have the major and minor scale in impressionism. You want ambiguity. When you use chromatic scales, which are all half steps, or whole tone scales, which are all whole steps, it makes it very ambiguous. And then the pentatonic scale, da 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 da, something like that is very also ambiguous. You can't tell what key you're in when you use these types of scales, which is what the composers of impressionism want you to not be able to tell. Okay. And this is not the best reproduction, but this is a Monet painting. And at first, you look at the bridge, right? Here's the bridge, and then like, oh, but this is kind of cool, and this is really pretty, and so it's not, like I said, it's not like just fruit sitting there. You're just looking. There's so many things to look at, and they don't tell you exactly what to look at. And if you go up real close, they're all made of little strokes to make a big hole, to make a WHOLE, that type of hole. So that's generally what impressionism is. Little, a bunch of ideas put together and makes this big one, and you're not sure what to listen to. Okay. The first composer of impressionism, and he is Claude Debussy, and as you can see, he is the turn of the century, 1862 to 1918. Mahler died in 1911, so and Mahler was born in 1860, so completely overlaps Mahler. But Mahler is quintessentially romantic. Claude Debussy, he's got romantic elements, but he is considered an impressionist, and he's French. Okay, so at first, he composed in a very traditional manner, but then eventually he goes against sonata form. Like in the beginning, he did compose some sonatas, like a violin sonata, cello sonata, wonderful pieces, a string quartet, kind of traditional. And then he kind of goes and does his own thing. He goes against sonata form. He likes tone poems. He does French art songs. So beautiful, his songs. They're not Lieder, because Lieder is in German. Okay. Lieder there are also art songs, but Debussy, they're French art songs. So you cannot call them Lieder. They have to be in German. And he is a prolific piano composer since Chopin, probably one of the most prolific piano composers. And he was very fond of Chopin's music. He honored Chopin very much. He does a set of preludes. Chopin does a set of preludes for piano, a set of etudes for piano. Now, Image, that Chopin didn't do that, okay? But he does do these pieces called Image, okay? And all sorts of sets, okay? You heard of Clair de Lune, right? Clair de Lune is beautiful, and that is part of the suite Bergamasque, okay? So he does his orchestration is a little bit heavier on the winds and the strings, and but still a beautiful lush treatment of strings. Loves to use whole tone scales, augmented triads, dominant ninth chords. Okay, and then La Mer is one of his most famous tone poems, and he also does Pelléas et Mélisande. I don't know if I pronounced that right, an opera, okay? So, anyway, he likes to obscure the tonality a bit, but still very beautiful, okay? You should listen. This is on the listening Prelude to an Afternoon of a Faun. It is so beautiful, okay? I will let you listen to it. Please listen for the flute solo. There's a lot of flute and harp, okay? Very, very noticeable and used very often throughout the entire piece, okay? It is an ABA form, right? And it's a very beautiful piece to listen to. A faun is a half man and half goat creature, okay? And I guess the faun is daydreaming and falls asleep, and he fantasizes about these two nymphs, which I guess are these mythical creatures, I guess. And they carry him off somewhere, and I don't know. I mean, you decide what happens with him and the two nymphs. I mean, didn't the French come up with the menage a trois and all that, you know? So anyway, sorry, I hope that wasn't too inappropriate. But um they're very it's a very beautiful piece, so please listen to that because that is on the listening. And this is just some selected music, and like I said, the chamber music is rather traditional. Okay, so you have La Mer, the tone poem. If you want to listen to it, there's a link. And then some piano pieces. You Sweet Bergamasque I mentioned. So two books of preludes, two books of etudes, just like Chopin. A Stomp, another set of piano pieces. There's three in that. Image 1 and 2, Children's Corner Suite, which is not for children to play, but it's in honor of his only daughter. Okay. And Lille Joyeux, The Joyous Isle, Arabesques, Pour le Piano. So this is just selected works. So the thing about Debussy is that just some things about his life. Did I put a picture of him? Oh, I didn't. Oh, darn. Okay, I didn't. Oh, there should be a picture of him. Sorry about that. Anyway, he was engaged to someone and he dumped her for this other woman. So that person he was engaged to committed or tried to commit suicide, did not succeed. Then he was married to the woman and he didn't find her very intellectual stimulating. So he ended up having an affair with one of his students' moms. Okay. Yeah, those must have been interesting lessons. And then he dumped his wife to be with the student's mom, and then his wife tried to commit suicide. So he must be very interesting person to have two women attempt suicide over him. However, he did suffer consequences because his friends were very upset that he dumped his wife and for another woman. They thought he treated his wife horribly, and because he was chastised and pretty much shunned by his friends, he ended up moving out of Paris and ended up at a British island and just lived there with his wife and his daughter. Okay. And his daughter, that was the only daughter he had. Okay. So I thought you'd find that interesting. All right. Okay. And I want to do Debussy and Ravel together because you will have to know the differences between Debussy and Ravel. And he's a little bit later than Debussy. Now, these are the ways that he is similar to Debussy. He is an excellent composer for pianists. Gaspard de la Nuit is one of the hardest works for piano ever written. Okay, it's a masterpiece. It's beautiful. Debussy is difficult, but not as hard as Ravel. Ravel is more difficult. Okay, and Gaspard de la Nuit is a perfect example of a very difficult piano piece. He does do French art song, very beautiful. Differs from Debussy in that even though he is considered an impressionistic composer, he likes to use old forms. He uses some Baroque genres like a suite. You know, there are Baroque suites. He bases his music on the Baroque suite quite often. Okay. Maybe he's a little less impressionistic than Debussy. He is still considered impressionistic, but he's kind of neoclassic, okay, which is the second style you'll get to know. But he is not a neoclassic composer. He just has those tendencies, but he is impressionistic. So make sure you know that he is not neoclassic, okay? But he uses some classic genres, okay? Um, Debussy is a good orchestrator. He's a very great orchestrator, but Ravel is known much more famous for it. Pictures at an Exhibition was written by Mussorgsky. It was a piano piece, and Ravel orchestrated it for a traditional orchestra, but he uses really interesting tone color, and it's one of the most uh, famous orchestra pieces like today. It's performed all the time. And the Pictures at Exhibition by Mussorgsky was originally written for piano, but Ravel orchestrated it, and that orchestrated version is performed constantly. Okay, it's super popular. All right. He, instead of using the whole tone scales, or chromatic scales, he prefers modes. He likes to use the Dorian, the church modes, Phrygian, Lydian, that kind of thing. Um, he is more, this kind of overlaps with the use of the Baroque and classical genres. He's a little more tied to the past. I would say Debussy's more romantic, and Ravel's more classical. Okay. And the piece on your listening is Jadot. Okay. And this is a solo piece. So you have Prelude to an Afternoon of a Faun to listen to from Debussy, a tone poem. And then you have Jadot for solo piano. And this is on your listening. And then I have some other, real cool pieces to listen to. The Concerto, the Bolero is super, super famous. You probably heard of it. This I put here. The Bolero has features each of the wind instruments. It gives each a solo, and they play the same thing over and over again. So it is a lesson in orchestration and listening to different tone colors. Okay, and the trombone solo is one of the hardest solos in the orchestra repertoire. It is super, super difficult, and it comes in at 7 minutes and 30 seconds. So the trombone has to sit there cold for 7 minutes and 30 seconds until he comes in. And so if you want to listen to that, and when you hear the professional play it, it makes it sound so easy, but it's super high, it's super out of range, and very difficult. And then this is the trombone solo fail, if you want to listen to that. Okay. If we were in class, I would play that for you. All right. I just put a list of his selected works. Daphnis and Chloe. This is a tone poem. Pavane for a Dead Princess. Okay. Miroirs, which is originally for piano, but Ravel orchestrated it. La Tombe de Couperin. Couperin is a French Baroque composer. So this is a suite with Baroque forms, Baroque, type things in honor of Couperin. And this is based on the tomb of Couperin. Valse Noble, sentimental waltzes. So waltzes, originally for piano, also orchestrated. Okay, so this is just some selected really cool works. Wrote like Debussy, wrote a quartet and wrote a trio, although Ravel's trios is better. It is better. And a sonata for just violin and cello that is just extremely difficult, Okay. All right. So I will conclude this video with Les Six. This is the Les Six Français. And these are 6 composers. They're just known as Les Six, kind of like the Mighty Five in the Romantic era. But this is the 20th century, and these are French. They are not Russian like the Mighty Five. But they're not nationalistic. Okay, so the Mighty Five, they were romantic, nationalistic composers. These are 20th century, more modern composers, or 20th century modern, if you want to think of it that way. And there's 6 of them. You don't have to know each one of these composers. Okay, just Les Six is good enough. You might have heard of Mio. It's not Milhaud. It's Mio. Okay, and Poulenc. These are probably the most famous. Taillefer is a woman. Okay, Honegger. Okay, Ulrich and Dure. I hope I pronounced those right. But the ones that most people are familiar with of Les Six is Mio and Poulenc. And Mio, the when what I would tell my students, and you're going to totally think I'm ridiculous, is that Mio is the composer that cats ask for by name. You know, Mio, Mio. Okay, sorry. All right, I thought I'd had to try. Okay. Lysis is music. They compose music that does not have any German influence. Okay, it's or characteristics. It is not anything like Debussy and Ravel. It's Debussy and Ravel is very lush and more sentimental. This is more. This is dry. This is straightforward. Okay. Um, yes, and I mentioned this is kind of like the French version of the Mighty Handful or the Mighty Five. This is a sextet by Poulenc, and if you want to listen to that, this is not on the listening, but this will give you an idea of how this differs from Debussy and Ravel. It's a piece for woodwind quintet and piano, so it's a very cool piece, but it has a little more humor. It's a little lighter, so it's not the same romantic approach that Ravel and Debussy have. There's also Scaramouche for saxophone and piano by Mio. Okay. So I will end it there. Okay. All right.